Good evening and welcome to tonight's Infrastructure Safety and Growth Scrutiny Committee, and welcome to everybody. Just remind members that the meeting is being recorded and live broadcast on YouTube. So item 1 is apologies. I have apologies from Councillor Andrew Cooper. Any other apologies from anyone? I think other than that we're a full team. So item 2 are the minutes of, in fact, the previous 2 meetings of 15th September and the 27th of September meeting. I'm happy to move them en bloc if there's somebody that was at both meetings. Rosie, thank you. All those in favour? Excellent, thank you very much. We'll sign those as a true record. Item 3 are declarations of interest. Anybody got any declarations of interest? Tonight's meeting, good. Item 4 is an update from me. Couple of items I'd like to just mention. One, with regard to our sort of work plan item on travellers, I've had meetings with Councillor Doyle, who's in the room tonight, and officers, and I think it's likely that something will come forward in the new year that we can get our teeth into a little bit and feed into. So I'm kind of pleased about that, and we'll probably need to organise an extra meeting just to deal with that. But that's not an issue, I don't think. Any comments from anybody on that?
Chair, can I just say that with regard to the recent temporary encampment in Glasgow, obviously we were informed that the responsibility for clearing the site lay with the lessors, the athletics club. So can we just have a look at, when we come to look at the detail, it's not always the case that we or the county are responsible for moving them, and therefore I think it'd be quite interesting to have an assessment of how many other sites that is delegated to, because it adds another layer to the issues that are involved, and obviously if that's a common effect, if it's rare, well, fine.
Steve, you want to comment?
That wasn't the point I made, Chair. No, I don't think the portfolio holders made a note of what I said at all, but I know that you have, and it will be followed up accordingly. No, it's not a problem. I'm just saying that your reply clearly wasn't directly relating to what I'd said, so I think it'd be easier to clarify it outside of the meeting. It's not about the clean-up. It was, you recall the email went round saying that the responsibility for the eviction being served lay with the athletics club rather than with the county council or the borough council. So it was that extra, that aspect that I was trying to highlight, which is what I didn't get back from your reply. So I assume that bit's if it's just so that we know where we've got those extra hoops to go through. Thank you.
Thanks, Simon. Yeah, it's in the detail that we'll be looking. Thanks. The other item I just want to mention, if you'll indulge me, I'd like to just move the agenda around a little bit. I know we have the leader Jeremy with us tonight, and I know he's feeling full of cold and cough, and I don't want him in the room for too many years that I care to remember in some respects, and I think it was originally brought forward from committee in maybe 2017. I think I put a report together that went and through this committee and went to cabinet with recommendations in 2019, and has been through a number of processes with additional recommendations since then, and I felt it was time to bring it back. We had a set of recommendations that last went to cabinet, and I'll just remind committee what they were before we move on to any input from officers and portfolio holder. That an EV charging operating model to be chosen as the primary delivery route. Further marketing exercise using procurement framework to secure a supplier be carried out. A detailed options appraisal following further market feedback, including costs, income, risks, be produced. Private sector location for EV charging on the wider Ventura retail park be investigated and promoted with relevant landowners. And an EV action plan be developed for adoption by the council, and in principle subject to the results of the detailed options appraisal, EV fast charging infrastructure being installed in at least one of the borough-owned car parks. So that was the last set of recommendations that went through cabinet, and I think that was December 2020. We have obviously Jeremy as leader, and I think it was his portfolio at that time. Rob's here now, and I think it's your portfolio now. And obviously we've got Matt Fletcher, whose officer responsibility it is. So I'm going to hand over to, well, who do I pick? I'm gonna say Jeremy to start off with.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And you're right, this has been kicking around for quite some time. Just to clarify in relation to portfolio responsibility, you'll notice this year when we introduced the Cabinet at full council a few months ago that the climate change agenda appeared in all portfolios, and that's because, as far as I'm concerned, it needs to be ingrained and embedded in everything we do. So the reason Councillor Pritchard is here this evening is in relation to the electric vehicle charging points on borough council assets. So it's quite specific that it's about electric vehicle charging on borough council assets. So that includes surface car parks and garage sites and other sites that are owned solely by the borough council. In terms of the other recommendations with other people's property, then we'll pick that up in Matt's update. But yeah, Councillor Pritchard's here in relation to the borough council assets and the possibilities there. So I'm not going to give you any detail. I'm going to hand straight over to Matt, who's going to give a full update as to where we're at and what we've achieved since the last time we spoke to you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Matt. Over to you. I'm looking for some good news.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Jeremy. So yeah, thank you for inviting me this evening. So a quick summary really of the recommendations that came out of Cabinet. Just to clarify, when you mentioned operating model 2, that was that lease land to an EV charging point operating company with the benefits that would be low upfront costs, low maintenance, and then on the sort of negative side, there's sort of less potential for income going forward and locations limited by the company's preferences. So that's in terms of the framework that we're looking at. That was model 2. What we're also, I think it's important that the specification looked at a fast charger, which is normally between 40 and 50 kilowatts. And particularly what I'm going to talk about tonight is off-street car parking. That's sort of my area of responsibility, and that's what we've looked at. So just going through the recommendations in order. So we've looked at model 2. We've taken that forward as just defined. A further marketing exercise has been forthcoming. So we've been out to market for a number of conversations with providers, which has been actually very challenging because of the specification of the fact that it's a fast charger. So fast chargers have two difficulties compared to drip feed chargers or overnight chargers, and they are that the upfront cost of the machines, of the equipment, is more expensive, and they also, because of the speed of them, there's limitations on where they can go. From a commercial point of view, then, obviously that the installers look to recover their costs, so therefore there's a significant outlay in the machinery. Therefore they want very specific sites, so much similar to, you'd see, a petrol station would want a high traffic area, or a food outlet. They have very specific parameters. So that's been very challenging for us to try and convince people within the town centre that there are certain areas to go to. However, we have been successful with that by using the ESPO framework, and without going into contractual details, we've highlighted two of our car parks that are high traffic flow, that are attractive to the operator, and there's 2 spaces in each car park at this moment in time that are identified. So in terms of then going on to the detailed appraisals, significant work's been done looking at the procurement routes for that. We're currently in final legal negotiations with the different contracts with that provider to make sure that it's appropriate for us. So basically, hopefully in the short term, once the legals have been all completed and verified, there should be 4 fast chargers, 2 on Riverside and 2 on Bolbridge. Location yet to be decided exactly within those car parks, but there'll be somewhere that's visible, lit and accessible to all. So in terms of that, a positive byproduct of the discussions was that by looking at some of the main providers in the market, conversations have been had with private landowners, and that has resulted, I understand, in some of those taking up other electric charging positions. So I understand Ventura Park is about to put some 7.5 kilowatt chargers in. And I think as a result of different discussions there and different models, there's been more opportunities opened up to people. So whilst we can't claim sort of responsibility for that, I think there's a general opening up of the market, and general discussions are happening. And then I think just coming down to point 5 of the Cabinet report from 17th of December, that an EV action plan is developed for adoption by the Council. So my understanding is there are obviously further discussions happening across the Council around different types of charging, whether that be overnight charging on road or whether that be on different parts of the Council's estate. So I think in short, whilst it's taken us a bit longer than we would have liked because of some of the commercial viability issues surrounding the installation of fast chargers, we are sort of on the track to getting that sort of completed very shortly. And like I said, it's just with solicitors and the relevant officers just to sign that off. So
Okay.
that's all I have to say, if that's okay.
If I could just make a couple of comments, but, unless Rob, do you want to? Okay. We haven't talked particular timescales. We've talked short term, and I want to feel we can have place some real proper timescales on this. I mean, it's clearly an improvement on where we've been for over a number of years, but we're still running behind, I think, other local authorities. So I as a comment at the moment, I really would like to see, is this going to happen in the next 6 months? Is it going to happen in 12 months? Is it going to happen before Christmas? Kind of thing. Do we have any feel at the moment of when these fast chargers will be going in? And I know you can't commit to anything specific, a specific date, but a feel.
I mean, my hope is certainly that by the end of the financial year, at the very latest, the reality is, so the initial contract has gone to solicitors from our side, both review, comments have been made, and then that's been passed back to the potential host provider for further comment. So there's that stage to get through, and then there's the sort of sign off from our point of view as the landholder. And from my understanding, that's it. So it's basically in the hands of both our solicitors and the representatives, the legal team, with the host provider. So, you know, certainly I'd be very disappointed if it wasn't March, but the legal discussions, you know, I don't want to go into too much detail about the contract, but the potential provider is quite a large entity, so that could take time. So it's very difficult for me to give you a time frame at this moment in time, I'm afraid, however much I'd like to.
No, I think that's a good indication. If we can sort of stick to those sort of ambition, I suppose. Any comments, questions from Tina?
I'm not going to say too much because everybody knows my feelings on EV charging and the lack of them. Are we not applying for any of the government funding from OZEV, Matt? The funding is still there, up to £14,000 that authorities can apply for, but that runs out obviously next year, March 2022. And just so people know, the fast chargers will charge at 22 kilowatts. Destination chargers that are at Ventura, for example, are designed for people that are going to be there just for a couple of hours, doing a little bit of shopping, maybe having something to eat, which charge at 7 kilowatts. My EV will only charge at 7 kilowatts because that's all the battery has the capacity for. So fast chargers actually aren't that good when you're putting them in town centres and boroughs like ours. Obviously we want people to charge and we want people to get off them quick enough to free up the space, but currently only Tesla and the Audi e-tron will charge at 22 kilowatts. So unless we're all driving around in them, and I don't think we are, the fast chargers won't actually be that good for borough. And I only know this because I've had mine since April and driven to Wales and different places and know how they work. I don't understand all the technical data that goes with it, but I do know somebody that does. So that's just something to bear in mind when going forward, really.
Any Jeremy?
Yeah, in terms of the Office for Zero Emission Vehicles, we've been in contact with them and we've been recognised nationally as an area that needs some assistance. So it's assistance in addition to that grant funding you were talking about. Councillor Pritchard and myself, with a few officers, have got a meeting with them in the next couple of weeks, and it's around that assistance as to how we can bring more online, not necessarily within the original recommendations from the Scrutiny Committee, but about just enhancing that whole offer, because it's been recognised that the market hasn't filled the gap in Tamworth. We've tried, as you are aware of, with the different tendering processes over the last couple of years, and we've not been able to get that success either. So it's time for a big carrot or a big stick to be involved. In terms of your comments around the high-speed charging, the spec that originally came from the Scrutiny Committee was about fast charging to encourage visitors to Tamworth. Now whilst that recommendation still stands, and that's what we've been trying to deliver, I think that the awareness that you've described, Councillor Clements, is certainly growing about the different market and the different way people will be using electric vehicles. Ultimately, all batteries are better charged over a long period of time rather than a rapid charge. But do you know what? I want to get in my car and drive it. So we will all want that fast charge, whether it's practical or not. That will be the aspiration and the desire. So it's how we best manage that. So yeah, there are some challenges and some better learning coming along. But yeah, in terms of the Office of Zero Emission Vehicles, yeah, we've got a meeting in the next couple of weeks to try and move the agenda along in Tamworth.
Thanks, Jeremy. Yeah, I mean, it's one of these things where if we keep waiting, we're probably always sort of aiming at a little bit of a moving target, but at some point, you just have to do something, don't you? And then adjust as you go along. So I'm just very pleased that something's happening. Simon.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of simple questions to start with, if I may. At the beginning of this process, members of the committee, not on a cross-party basis, met with a potential supplier of short notice. Is that the supplier that we're currently in negotiation with?
I don't know if you know the answer to that. That supplier, I believe, has been bought out by somebody else, but as far as I'm aware, they're not the supplier that we're dealing with.
Am I right, therefore, in understanding that we've been in negotiation with a single supplier because there's only one supplier in the market for this sort of opportunity?
So I think there's one supplier that showed interest in Tamworth, because I think the point you've all made, because there isn't any supply within particularly the town centre, that supplier has to take a bit of a punt in some regards. So yeah, that supplier has capacity and ability to take a risk. So I hope that answers your question. Yes.
That does. Thank you, and thank you to the leader for his explanation of the earlier point. Another completely separate point has thrown up the fact that there's quite a lot of turnover in our legal services department. When you say that this is being negotiated with our legal team, are we subcontracting it out from legal services to specialists, and have those costs been borne in mind in the project proposal?
So the answer to that is our legal services have reviewed that, and actually the solicitor that's recently reviewed the contract has also done several similar contracts for other authorities. So it has been provided by our legal service, and it has been done in-house, but it has been done by someone with experience and knowledge of state-driven EV charging.
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting it be done by somebody who wasn't knowledgeable. I was wondering whether they were in-house or whether we'd had to go out for that. I don't know quite how that fits in with specialism, so I just wondered whether we'd had to go, because I understood there'd been quite a bit of turnover in the department, and therefore, not easy to keep track of these things.
No, we did. I just confirm we did go in-house because the knowledge
that's fine.
was there. So.
Understood. If we got the knowledge, that's great. Thank you for that. Chair, can I just make a comment? We've all very carefully and well-behaved way that we're quite experienced bunch around the room tonight, have not asked about the contract or the contractor or all of those things. It does strike me, and I appreciate you're trying to be nice to the leader, and I can only suspect your motives. But the point that I'm getting at is we keep getting these reports where we can't discuss the detail, the hard bits, the where, the how much, because it's commercially sensitive. So why are these reports brought in public forum when they could be taken as confidential ones? And this report has come as your verbal report with the presence of the leaders rather than. So I'm just asking that question. This has happened in a couple of committees recently where we've had confidential material that we can't talk about in a public forum. I'm just asking that scrutiny chairs consider whether there needs to be some use of the latter part of the meeting for items which could be fully understood if knuckled down, because at the moment what we've heard, and I don't doubt the officer's point, there's one supplier who's prepared to have a go at a town centre site where there isn't. I mean, it's like the first shop that buys into Ventura, isn't it? when Sainsbury's bought into Ventura, loads of other people then bought in round them. And I actually knew the guy who sold the site, and he said, when we got the phone call from Sainsbury's, we knew that then everyone else would start to say, well, if Sainsbury's are going there, we're happy to come in beside them and be across the road or whatever. And so I have no problem with the fact there's one company willing to have a go, but that does make us, if you like, we haven't got a very strong bargaining position. So I just asked, have we been able to drive home a decent deal given the circumstances, or is this proving to be quite an expensive option? And we can't really ask that question because we can't ask about the money. So that's my point that I would make about these reports coming in open forum without some kind of opportunity to discuss that.
Thanks, Simon. I'll just sort of make some comment on that. Actually, it's not my report. It's a verbal report from officers. I thought it was important to get it back for us to look at that.
Chair, I endorse that entirely. I'm just saying, when something comes as a verbal update from yourself, effectively, with the officers providing that detail, we don't get a report that we can go back to later on as a scrutiny committee to see whether it was delivered within the financial parameters that would normally be laid out in a report.
Sure. And take your point. We could deal with this as a confidential item in its entirety. I just think we have a duty to show the public what we're doing, and rather than just going for a taking the whole meeting into confidential, which doesn't look that good. I don't think. I think it's more. It would be more useful if perhaps that information came to us at a different time. Jeremy, do you want to make a comment?
It's not for me to comment on the workings of the scrutiny committee, but I might offer you a lifeline. The point that is raised is absolutely valid, and whilst we can talk about some of the issues publicly, some of the more detailed questions that the councillor raises, would be of interest to all members. So whilst I don't want to get involved in how you run your meetings and make any suggestions, as a lifeline, would members like to receive a confidential briefing from the officer circulated by email, just to set that out? And if then there are further questions, it's up to you how you guys manage that at scrutiny. But through Matt, we can get a confidential briefing out relatively quickly via email.
If I may, Chair, I'd say that's excellent.
Well,
response.
Thanks, Simon.
From me as the person who's raised it.
As me as chair, I was going to.
Because
I was going to deal with that, Simon. Thank you.
I think otherwise, Chair, the issue is that we can show the public what we're doing, but we don't tell them what it's costing. So you could argue it's equally nice to do all the good bits in public, but not mention the costs. So I just think the offer of a detailed briefing with the answers to the questions we would have asked were we not so well behaved is excellent.
Okay. Happy to receive that from yourselves. Thank you. Dan.
Cheers, Chair. Just wanted to go back to Councillor Clement's point about the fast charging. My view on this is, cars at the minute won't be reaching the fast charge points, but if we're looking at the way the world's moving, we're looking at future proofing as well. So I think the way the committee is moving with that is the right direction, because we don't want to stick 7.5 chargers in where everybody else has got them, and then us be lagging behind to have to refit fast charge soon in the future. Cheers, Jeff.
Thanks, Dan. Simon.
I'd just like to make one last comment, if I may, Chair, and that's to congratulate you on the persistence with which you've pursued this topic, because I think if it hadn't been for your persistence, then we wouldn't have seen the movement we have. So congratulations, and despite my inevitable desire to ask about the detail, I'm very pleased to see the progress that's being made, and if it's within this financial year, whilst you mentioned Christmas, in reality these things are, I'm not sure how many days it is to Christmas now, but I really don't want to know. But from a practical point of view, I can't see anyone wanting to dig up car parks at the maximum time of usage. So I suspect after Christmas is actually not a bad time to be doing it. And the members of portfolio holders are to be congratulated, and the officers too, on getting the progress to date. Thank you.
Thanks, Simon. I appreciate those comments. And yeah, I was being slightly frivolous in my Christmas comment, but just trying to provide a little bit of added motivation. And yes, I thank the leader, Robert's portfolio holder now, and Matt for putting that extra work in and providing that extra impetus. I think it's good. I'm really pleased to see something happening, something moving. I'd like to bring Rob in actually, because I think he may have, I don't know, do you have any further comments to make perhaps about garage sites?
Yeah, well, as I say, in terms of the town centre is just a small part of what the authority's doing. The garage clearance site has been and remains in my portfolio. So one thing I've been keen on that is use that as an opportunity where we're creating parking to put in electric charging points, because as members will know, a lot of the sort of the council estates weren't built for 3 or 4 car households, and therefore will be very difficult to provide charging for some of these residents as well. So it's an opportunity to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, where we can provide parking and where it's possible put in some electric charging points. So obviously that will be more a trickle process, because as sites are being cleared, but we'll be looking at putting in a significant number of electric charging points throughout the borough. Separately, there's also I've actually got a question at full council at county on Thursday, because the county obviously a significant, should we say, landowner in the town in terms of the roads, and a significant asset owner in terms of lampposts. So the government's offering 75% of costs for local authorities, in our case it would be the county, to install on-street electric charging points. So I'm pushing them to consider, for example, the Lees as a scheme in Tamworth to consider. That would be an interesting trial. But I say they could deliver, just in a few streets what we as a borough can deliver, in total. So that's something I'm keen to push them to do.
Well, that's fantastic. I think it's fantastic news all round. Any questions or comments on that, Simon?
Well, obviously we're delighted, and the garage site would be really good, because as Councillor Pritchard said, the number of cars relative to the number of households has squeezed those spaces no end. I recall that when the B5000 was widened, they found that someone had wired themselves into a lamppost and cut their electricity bill. Is it the case that this on-street parking would involve lampposts? Just out of curiosity, because it makes for an interesting sort of way forward.
The counties would be yes, but instead of their houses, it's their cars that they're wiring up to them.
No, it was just, I was told the story by an old council when I first started. They cleared a B5000, sent all the workmen in saying, yeah, it's all sorted, and they went into one house, went, it's live, and then they found they'd wired it into the lamppost. So but that's in the days before computerised lamppost monitoring, which would have thrown up that one lamppost was using an awful lot more power than any other. So it's not something that anybody could copy now. But no, it's really good news, and look forward to Councillor Pritchard getting a positive response to his question.
Thanks, Simon. Any further questions or comments from committee on this item? No? Okay, so well, to conclude, I have no particular recommendations to propose. I think I'm just a little bit stunned that something's that we're moving forward with things. So very happy. I think on behalf of committee, I think we're very, very happy, and thank you very much for the update. I hope you don't mind that I will bring it back again in 12 months' time just to check up on you.
Chair, shouldn't we formally note the update that we've received, because that way it is on the record for, as you say, future committees, because it's a good reminder.
Yeah, I would agree.
So if I move that, if
I'm
someone,
happy to second that.
then the fact that we've had the people come and make the report is recorded.
All those in favour? Unanimous, thank you very much. Thanks, Matt, Rob, Jeremy. Go home and get a lemsip down you. Thank you very much. Ben, are you feeling okay, or do you need to? Okay. Okay, so we'll move on to our next item, which is public space protection orders, which is Kettlebrook and Warwickshire Moor. And thank you, Joe and Steve, for your patience. And I hope you didn't mind the change of order. I'm sure you understand that I wanted. Oh. Okay, so let's move on quickly. Steve, do you want to introduce?
I am going to make this very, very quick. This is a report that some of you are new to the council, so this will be the first time that you've come across this. PSPOs are something that we do in collaboration with our partners mainly. These two in particular are due up for renewal. They're 3 years old, and after that I'm going to pass over to Jo, because I told her I'd keep it quick.
Thank you, Councillor Doyle and members. A while ago, actually, in 2015, the recommendations for the way that we deal with PSPOs was approved. That once a PSPO was approved, the Scrutiny Committee would actually look at any consultation or look at any renewals of the PSPOs in place. These are two PSPOs that were put in place in 2018. Largely due, at that time there was quite a lot of experienced antisocial behaviour, certainly around the underpasses through to the town centre and around Namco and up towards Reedsmace along Kettlebrook, through Kettlebrook. There was also some extensive damage done at the time to Warwickshire Moor around the pier that's there, the little walkway, and through the issues around the back of Renault Road at Anchor Moor. The public space protection orders were put in place, were overwhelmingly approved by the consultation that was in place. We are now at the 3 years to either actually stop them completely or to just renew them as in place. The consultation that we've done with the police have actually gone back through their reports of any antisocial behaviour at these locations. They have actually dropped since the PSPO is in place. I mean, obviously we have had COVID as well, but they fully actually support that we can keep these two PSPOs in place for a further 3 years. Not well as a deterrent. There hasn't been any fixed penalties issues, but they have reported quite extensive, certainly at the time they were actually put in place, discussions with certainly some young people that used to hang around among the underpasses and at the back of Renault Road. We have experienced some further calls for Renault Road, and we are updating, should the committee tonight decide that we want to proceed, updating some of the signage at Renault Road to make sure that the public are aware of the public space protection order in place. Some of the members will remember that there was a discussion around extending the PSPO at Warwickshire Moor actually beyond the railway bridge. The police have reported that actually, whilst there is evidence of gatherings there, it doesn't necessarily result in calls from the public and any issues that, you know, over the road, and it is being dealt with on a low level basis. So they don't see the need at this time, or actually it's quite difficult to enforce in that area, which is very, very dark at night and very inaccessible if you know, in the winter, certainly when it gets dark. So they would propose that, you know, with your consent, that we keep the PSPO border as is up to the railway bridge. So once this evening is, the proposal is that, you know, the committee consider the renewal of these PSPOs and delegate the authority to Councillor Doyle as a portfolio holder to sign them off for a further 3 years from the 1st of November.
Thanks, Jo. Yeah, I mean from what I see, the evidence suggests that they are extended. We sort of continue as we are for the additional time. It seems clear that they're doing what they're supposed to do. I'm comfortable with that, Simon.
Yeah, just say, Chair, there was a bowl hall engagement day on Saturday and the 3 local councillors were there. I haven't spoken directly to Councillor I've spoken to Councillor People and Councillor Norquay and not to Councillor Harper directly, but I believe they were all in agreement with the PCSO that continuing the I know that those 2 were definitely, and I'm sure Councillor Harper was as well, that the PCSO agreed that keeping the current one was very important because it is the bit that people can get to and it's nearest to houses. It's the most likely to cause disruption and difficulties. And whilst it's worth keeping an eye on what happens towards the further end, the current situation is a very useful one. And certainly those of us who can remember the pictures in the Herald and others of the the damage done on Warwickshire Moor prior to the introduction of the extra enforcement powers would suggest that it's good to keep that lid firmly in place. Thank you.
Well, thanks. Any other questions or comments from committee? So, Martin.
Thank you. Just a couple of things. I realise I understand probably why, but it surprises me that the small car park next to the tennis courts and Namco station, that it hasn't been included. I mean, I kind of understand probably why, but I'm just surprised it's not there just in case. Because I mean, we all know that loads of people gather on that little car park, and if anything's going to happen, it's probably going to be there. Second is, have they got any stats on fines issued, enforcement on these, or have they just not issued any at all?
Yeah, I can confirm that they've not issued any fines actually on the PSPOs. The only fines that have been issued, I think, is for the vehicle-wide nuisance one, and I understand the issue around the car park, but I will reassure you that quite often on our car parks, the police can manage that situation with the nuisance vehicle PSPO. And have done and have actually stopped people doing the donuts in the car park and loud music that people report in. And obviously with a PSPO it has to be reported in as an antisocial behaviour issue of concern. So yeah, I mean, whilst it is obviously outside of the area of this particular one, it can still be managed by the nuisance vehicle PSPO.
Happy. Any other questions, comments from committee?
Happy to move the recommendations, Chair.
Thanks.
Or second them if you wish to move them.
I'm comfortable with Simon's proposal and your second. All those in favour? Excellent. Unanimous. Thank you very much. Thanks, Steve. Joe, do apologise if I've made you late. Excellent. Right, we move back to our agenda a little bit with responses to reports of the Infrastructure, Safety and Growth Scrutiny Committee. So, although we didn't take any recommendations directly to Cabinet on the Future High Streets Fund, they did have an update on the 30th of September, and they did thank us for our input. So that was quite nice to see. Next item is consideration of matters referred to our committee from Cabinet or Council, and there has been none. And so, as the
Chair, can I just clarify that doesn't preclude the comments in council from the leader that scrutiny committees would be picking up the renewal process.
reset and recovery.
Yeah.
No,
So that although you're saying no, it's not no in
as a specific.
as a
item.
specific. That's fine,
Yeah.
as long as we keep that in mind. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, so I think we're on to forward plan. think there's a couple of items to note, but not things that we've got direct input into, and I think they'll be perhaps towards a December. Do we have a December? We have a December meeting. We have a November. We may have a December meeting. Let's see how we go. We all love an extra meeting.
Chair, were you going to suggest which items you thought?
Well, there's the council house repairs policy, as I think that's been pushed back a little bit, so that could end up feeding in a little bit later.
That was considered the other night at corporate scrutiny, and it's gone once to housing, and there's the new subcommittee on housing. Not that I would want us not necessarily to see it, but I'm just pointing out it may need you to have a word with Councillor Farrell and Councillor Jay, because two different aspects of that policy have been brought to two different committees. One which was the update the other night on how it's going, and then previously to the Housing Committee on how it's going and how it might be restructured, which wasn't mentioned at the corporate scrutiny meeting the other night. So I think it might be good if we could just tie it up so that the whole thing is looked at.
I think we've probably got that. The item at corporate scrutiny was very much looking what we've done, and I think I would like to look at where's it going to be. So
which was what they took to housing subcommittee, and that's why I was saying it was quite interesting, because if you'd sat through housing subcommittee looking at the future, it was quite interesting to sit at corporate scrutiny and hear about the past. And I'm just saying I think it'd be good if we could agree that the whole thing comes together, because out of the report to corporate scrutiny the other night, there wouldn't have been any reason to change the current approach, and yet the housing subcommittee had heard cogent arguments about changing the manner of charging the contract out, which rather suggests that it wasn't saying there was anything wrong, it was just saying there was a new process, but that then wasn't reflected at corporate scrutiny.
I think we have to, and I agree, Simon. I think it's important to have things in the round. The new housing committee obviously isn't a scrutiny committee, so it may make some proposals or some decisions going forward, but we have a duty as a scrutiny committee to dig into it.
I just have the joy of sitting on all three, so occasionally I quite like to see them joined up.
Point taken.
It wasn't a criticism, Jay. It was just saying if you could agree with the others so that we don't get that odd situation we had at corporate scrutiny the other night, where kind of, as you say, it was looking back, whereas there'd already been a meeting about looking forward.
Sure, yeah. Ben.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was just going to say, really, would it? Whilst I think it's important that we do our bit and look at it from our point of view, with infrastructure and safety and the growth aspect, I kind of agree with Councillor People, which is strange. It's a new feeling that I've not experienced a lot.
Many members of the cabinet have done before you.
I kind of agree. It would be beneficial to have a joint scrutiny looking at this item. Mainly, I'm thinking about officers' time as well. It would be better use of officers' time if they were just presenting once to both committees, as opposed to presenting the same thing three or four different times. Just my thoughts on that.
Okay. Well, I'm getting a feeling in the room. I'll speak with the chair of corporate scrutiny. I'll speak with the chair of corporate scrutiny and then see if we can organise.
If you mention extra meeting, he'll probably let you chair it.
Well, you may well be right.
I think the thing is, Chair, if it was presented as a joint presentation to both committees, we could still make separate recommendations from each committee. As I say, I just think it would be better use of officers' time to just present that once.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah.
If it reassures Councillor Price, Chair, I agree with him, because it struck me the other night I was sat there, and the same. Well, like I said, you know, the leader, the deputy, even the deputy leader has occasionally agreed with me. No, from a practical point of view, it just seemed strange to sit with officers, largely the same officers. Certainly, one key officer who'd been at both meetings, each time for an hour and a half, discussing the progress of one particular contract.
It's a good point.
That's all I'm saying is let's try it and tie it together.
I'll be honest, I think it's something that we don't do well enough as a council, because there's a lot of things that go through 2 or 3 different committees which are the same, and as the chairman of licensing and some of the reports that we have, which will then come to this committee, but will also go to corporate scrutiny committee as well. I think it would certainly be beneficial as an authority if we looked at potentially having them presented to everybody, and then we all went away and made our own decisions.
Thanks, Ben. Fair comment. There was, I think that was it for forward plan. To be honest.
You said 2 items, Chair. So does that help?
I'm just.
Always trying to help.
There's Future High Streets Fund, which I think that will be coming.
We were told last time that it would come to November.
Yeah.
Is that my memory right on that?
Yeah, it's on for
yeah, that's why I seem to remember the officer saying we'll be back in November.
So that's kind of an ongoing, as we know. We'll move on to working group updates. I've obviously mentioned the travellers' situation as far as coming to scrutiny in my chair's update some time ago. Tina, I think you were going to circulate some notes from the fireworks stuff. I think were you not?
Yeah, that was done at the last meeting.
Was it really?
Yeah, they've all been sent.
I do apologise, and I may not have picked those up.
Just on the traveller update, we had a licensing update meeting, myself, Ben and Gareth and Anna and Stephen Doyle, and I dared to mention it to my peril. I'm still not convinced that we as an authority have a policy of any description on travellers. We have a list of bullet points that are legal requirements that we must follow, and I get that, but when you check on other authorities' website, it's there, it's plain to see. If I can't find it as a councillor in the access that I have, then to me that suggests that there isn't one that's visible. It's probably hidden somewhere under another title, so it would be interesting to have that brought forward and to have some input into that, to put some meat on the bones and know where we all stand as councillors when travellers do become an issue, because Tamworth seems to be a target at the moment, week in and week out, and there's just like we need to know where we stand on it, and we need to know, and I mentioned this before about bringing Ben Adams in, because we need to know what the police's stance on this as well, because from where I see and having witnessed them in my ward of Wilnecote, the police are quite prepared to not be confrontational, which I get, but they're also prepared to just kind of, oh well, they're in now, let the council deal with it. If somebody's broken entry, if I go and cut a padlock off a gate, I'll get done for criminal damage and breaking an entry. But there just seems to be a bit of a loose rule around, well, did you actually see them do it?
Well,
do you know where I'm coming from on that one?
I understand your points, Tina, and as I say, we're still obviously, some of these conversations might be for a different time as opposed to just a working group update. I did have a conversation or a meeting with Councillor Doyle and Anna Miller to really. we as a scrutiny committee had asked, or as a working group through this committee had asked a number of questions that the officers had perhaps not been particularly forthcoming with the answers, because maybe they didn't have the answers. However, they have committed to now make some comment on those questions, and that they will have something to bring to committee in the new year. And I say I'm happy that we will then be able to feed into that, and I think that's the right way that we need to do those things. Simon, I know you're eager to come in.
I was in support of Councillor Clemence's point. When I reported the encampment in Glasgow, I drew the officers' attention to the fact that one of the two barriers to the car park had been damaged.
Yeah.
Now, my view was that on the assumption that we had maintained it as a barrier, then the only reason it could have been broken was by the entrance. And the comment I got back was, did I see it? Well, no, I didn't. I mean, it was pure chance. I was actually getting my car tested for what was wrong with it. And the guy and I were driving it alternately so that he could hear it, and we happened to go into the car park or go down to the car park in order to check it. So there's no way I saw them going in. I just happened to see they were there and reported it because I saw a child there, and I thought, well, there must be proper care taken if there are children on site. But to get the answer of, well, did you see it? And I do think this sort of, is all part of what we all want to understand, because every single time people are going on to areas where they're not permitted to go, we're then being told, well, did someone see them? Well, on the whole, people are not there to watch the arrival, and therefore we do need to understand what policies there are in place.
Yeah.
And I know you've got big plans for a meeting with Ben Adams with the committee.
I've heard from him today. Funnily enough.
Well, that's great. We can hear about that. But what I mean is, I think that's why I said to you, I want to make sure when we do see him, we have the opportunity to ask these sort of questions, which actually are what affects our constituents on a day-to-day basis, as well as the big picture stuff, which I look forward to. I'm sure it'll be a really instructive day, but we've got to have these points where we can say, where do you stand? Because non-confrontational policing, you can all understand that, it's great. I was delighted that this time there wasn't violence in Glasgow like there was before, when Sergeant Coxhead was here as the local commander, because I remember him, he was very bad, and it was great that it didn't escalate, so I'm delighted about that. But we're all asking questions like, well, do you actually have to watch them take something down, or does the fact that it was fine before and isn't now a reasonable argument for criminal damage? And let's find out, where are the police's hands tied, or is it just that the council's not very forceful, or as Councillor Price has said, and I think Councillor Clements has said, we haven't got a policy, and therefore it's terribly difficult to enforce it in the first place.
It's a challenge I've made to officers and the portfolio holder that we do not have a policy, and as a formal document, as opposed to, as Tina has said, a set of guidelines or a procedure, but we don't have a policy, and that's something that I'm hoping they're going to bring to us in the new year. I've got that commitment, and I will circulate the questions that I have asked officers to the rest of the committee, and I will send them again to officers, and hopefully we can get some answers before then that we can then feed into that future meeting if committee's happy with that.
Could we agree that Councillor Clement's point about raising it directly with the Police Crime Commissioner, because I'm assuming that he isn't facing that situation just in Tamworth, so they'll have, you know what I mean, you get a wider perspective in the sense of he'll presumably be honest with us and say, well, actually, when it happens in so and so, this is a well-defined policy. Therefore, my officers can do this. Whereas if it happens somewhere else, I can't because it's not clear. Do you know what I mean? Or he may say, well, actually, it's the law that's the issue, not the. But either way, we get some more feedback, and I think what Councillor Clement said is very valid.
Thanks, Simon. And yes, I'm happy to say I've heard from Ben today with regard to inviting him to our. I'm going to call it a crime day. I don't want to call it a crime day, but inquiry day potentially. He's quite. He welcomes the opportunity to come and talk to committee. So I will write to him directly and gather some feelings if committee's happy with that. Moving on. Committee work plan. We've got. Well, I think we're going to probably have quite a busy November. Ben, I'm going to ask you actually. I know you mentioned earlier in the year the taxi licensing points item, and I'm wondering, is that an item that is going to come to sort of November committee for us to look at, or would you rather have some more time to gather evidence and go through your licensing committee first?
Can me and you get together after Thursday, maybe
Yes.
early next week? Because licensing committee will have had an update by then on the scheme and what the scheme's been doing, and then I can bring you some more information about that.
Okay. But yeah.
So if we can get together early next week, that.
Happy with that. I just want to my work plan. Have you? Thank you, Tom. So November we've got Joe, thank you. Yes. Future High Streets Fund coming. An infrastructure funding statement. And then in December, I think we're probably going to have waste management coming back to us with some exciting updates, which will be quite interesting to see, I feel. And potentially some taxi licensing points. But if committee's happy for me to arrange the items as we seem to have been able to move forward with in the past, then I'm happy with that, Ben.
Yeah, just another thing. I know we've got a busy work plan for the rest of the year, but me and yourself had a brief conversation after the last meeting, I think, and there is an item that I would like the committee to look at, which is facilities provided for HGV drivers, and this comes off the back of some issues that we've been having in my patch in the Castle Ward with the new housing estate that's been built next to the brakes warehouse and things around there. Obviously the HGV drivers have been parking on the streets for many years before the housing development was started to be built, but residents have obviously now got concerns with them parking there, and concerns with not having toilet facilities, littering, various other things, and I think also on the back of where we are in the UK with HGV drivers and how, speaking to some HGV drivers in the industry, how underappreciated they feel when they go to certain places and the facilities that are provided for them. So I think it would be a good item for us to have a look at as a committee, and see what facilities we have in Tamworth. And the only facilities that I can actually think of off the top of my head is the M42 services, but they would more service the Birch Coppice sort of area, whereas I work on the Lichfield industrial estate down here, and I know from personal experience there are hundreds and hundreds of lorries that come through that industrial estate on a daily basis, and they're lined up on every street corner, and it's an absolute nightmare, to be honest. And there are no facilities this side of the town for that. And I was wondering, is there somewhere where we could provide some facilities quite easily? We discussed potentially somewhere like the Jolly Sailor car park, for instance, that's not overly used but has had access before for coach drop-offs and things like that. Whether that would be somewhere acceptable, because I know obviously there's residents around there now, but I do feel that it's quite an important thing that we should try and look at if we can fit it into the work plan.
I think.
Don't know what everybody else thinks.
I think personally it's an interesting topic, and potentially quite important. And I would suggest you heading a working group up, to be honest, Ben, to sort of do a little bit of digging around. Simon, do you want to make a comment?
I was just going to say, Chair, that was an issue that was the issue raised by residents, which is one aspect of it. When I was out in May, and I was encountering people saying, well, and I have to say there's a bit of you that sort of says, but you knew the houses were facing the thing, and then you talk to them about what's actually the bit that's griping, and the contrast between here and, I mean, I regularly go to France, and in France they have this culture where the service areas, virtually all the service areas on major roads, but also close to junctions, where they do effectively provide for them to park, and they can then have toilets and other facilities. And even so, you still see them cooking their own food and getting the caligas out, and so it's not like they're all being forced to use over commercialized facilities, but nonetheless it's as though people have sort of said, well, we want all these lorries moving around, therefore there've got to be spaces for them and somewhere proper for the people who drive them, and it's particularly noticeable in France because they have a ban on lorry movements on a Sunday, except for chill group. So if you go down some of the big motorways on a Saturday, you'll see them gradually filling up, and they'll have like car parks almost, because the drivers have found their spot that fits their driving schedule. They've pulled in there, they've stopped there, they know they can't go till at least lunchtime the following day. There's a few exemptions, but basically it's meant to be a day when the shops are not open for a full day, so you don't have all those overnight deliveries going in. And it's just been thought through. And I think what Councillor Price is suggesting is that, as a transport hub, Tamworth really ought to be more driver friendly. And I would be very happy to help with anything on that basis, because making Britain more acceptable to drivers might help with the driver shortage following Brexit. Sending them home wasn't the smartest move. But there we go. So that's where I would stand, and very happy to help Councillor Price put together a paper for committee, if he is happy with that.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. I was just a point that council people made there about the residents, and you kind of think, well, you knew they were going to be there. And I think one of the big problems at the minute is if you speak to the lorry drivers, they'll say, well, this is where we've always parked, and we can't sort of say to them, well, why are you parking here when you could go here? Because at the minute there is no here. That's just where they've always been, and that's what they've always done. And now we're expecting them to change the way that they've always operated, because we've approved a housing estate to be built next to where they work. And I think I really think that it's important that we look at, can we provide something? Do we just use that car park? Can we signpost it? I'm not suggesting we spend millions of pounds on building a lorry park, as great as that would be, but I certainly think that it'd be good to look at. I mean, I've heard about more warehouses being built the opposite side of Birch Coppice, and it's going to be a green industrial estate, and it's going to have a lorry park, but again, that will only service that part of the town centre. There is still nothing this side of the town, and when we've got so much industrial space at this side of the town, I think it would be not good of us to not at least look at it and consider what we could do.
Thanks, Ben.
I think we're all in agreement. It's a good idea.
I think so. Just before I bring Rosie in, I mean, I am totally comfortable if you want to say go away, do some work, bring it back. We can always find time to fit things in. Oh, there you go. Rosie.
Yeah, I'm very interested in this. I was listening to something on the radio the other day, two lady lorry drivers talking about where facilities are provided. The facilities for females are virtually non-existent. So if you do form a working group on this, I'd be very interested in taking part in that and seeing what we can do on the equality side of things.
Perfect. Sounds like, Ben, you've got yourself a working group. Okay, good. I have nothing further to add. I think we're probably done. It's 7:15. I'll formally close the meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Are we off, Adam?